Today we're going to be working on something that's completely new to me and took me hours and hours and hours of research because, of course, true to my Brianna K style, I wanted to include as many sizes as possible, and I worked really hard on this sweater, so I hope you really like it for your furry one. Of course, I needed to make sure I had sizes for every pup that might want a sweater, so I have done it from extra, extra small to 3X large. So 8 sizes in here that I hope that will work for your little one. We're going to be making the 8th one on camera today. It will be the extra small, and we're going to be making that in this yarn. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I just want to make sure if you are deciding on what size to make, you'll want to measure your pup for the chest measurements. The length is easily adjustable, so mostly we want to make sure that we're getting that right chest measurement in there. And this measurement in the pattern on the schematic already includes the 2-inch ease. So you want to make sure that your pup is underneath it. It's less than, if possible, than that chest measurement to make sure we have some ease in there. I've also included on each one a little hole for their harness. You can omit this and just work it in pattern if you don't want the hole for the harness clip that goes on their back. This one was for my little Luna. She's 3.5 pounds. So this is the tiniest, extra, extra small. She looks super cute in it, even with her fluff and her fur. It's a gorgeous stitch, and I used the size large for my other Sheltie, Oliver, and he looks so dashing in this, and the color tones of this one really goes well with his fur. So today, to get started on this, the yarn that I used was the Hirschner's worsted yarn. I love it. You should see the color ranges. The other reason why I love it is because this yarn line comes in different yardages. So say you're making the really big one, you can order more yardage. If you're making a small one, you can order a smaller ball. So it's the same yarn, same colors, but just in different yardage. This worsted yarn is amazing. So this one in particular has 489 yards. That's amazing. And this is a worsted weight that you can get on Hirschner's. You will need 2 crochet hooks for this pattern. One is a 4.5 hook. I use that for this neck ribbing. That's the only thing I use it for. And then we'll switch to a 5mm hook for the remainder of the body. And I just want to note as well, one of the reasons why I worked so hard on this is I wanted to do a design that worked with the wheat stitch, but also one that was one piece top down. So there's no seaming involved here, 0 seaming whatsoever. You'll also want to tape measure, like I said, to measure your pup and measure your gauge, measure as you go. And then of course, scissors to cut those ends of the yarn, a yarn needle to weave those in, and then stitch markers. Because we're going to be working in rows and rounds, you'll want to make sure that you mark the beginning of each round or row to keep track of where you are in this pattern. So we're going to go ahead and get started by making the extra small. Now, one of my favorite things about this Hirschner's yarn is the tail end that says easy start. Yes, thank you very much. To get started, we are going to create a slip knot and place that onto our hook. Next, we are going to chain 6. And I want to also note we have started, just like I said we would, we have started with the 4.5mm crochet hook just for this ribbing. I like to tighten down my last chain, and in this very first row, work in those back humps of that chain. So we're going to work in the second chain from the hook and single crochet, and then single crochet into the remaining across. Now that is row 1 of our neck ribbing. We're going to turn our work, chain 1, and now working in the back loops only for the stitches for the ribbing, which when we look at our stitch, the very top of our stitch looks like a V, and we would insert our hook through both of those loops. But when we're working just in the back loop only, we only want to go through that back loop, so missing that front loop, and we will single crochet into each stitch across. So we have 5 stitches. And this, what we're working on, is row 2 And row 2 is going to be our repeat row. So for every single row for the ribbing, as we work it up in rows, we are going to be repeating row 2. So I'm going to turn my work, chain 1, working in that back loop only, single crochet, all the stitches across. And for this extra small size, we are going to repeat row 2 until we have a total of 42 rows. Now that we've crocheted the 42 rows that we need, we are going to go ahead and join our current row with our first row. So we're going to fold these together, and then we're going to be working through both of them. So I'm going to chain 1, and then working through the back loop of my current row and the back loop of my first row. Then we will yarn over and slip stitch those together. So back loop only of my current row, back loop only of my first row, yarn over and slip stitch together. And we will do that for all 5 stitches, or however many stitches you have depending on the size, across. Now that we have done that, this can be the outside, or you can even flip this and rotate to have the seam be on the outside, which I think is a little bit more less noticeable. And you can weave in this end at this point if you want, or you can tuck it in for later. Now this is where we will be setting down our 4.5 millimeter hook. We no longer need it for the rest of the pattern, and we are going to be working from here on out with the 5 millimeter hook. Now we're going to be working in rounds. We're going to go ahead and chain 1, and then we're going to be doing a slip stitch for each row. So 1 slip stitch per row all the way around. And of course, now that we're working in the round especially, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and grab a stitch marker and place that in the very first slip stitch of the round so we know where we started. So we're just going to keep working across, working 1 slip stitch per row. So we will have 42 slip stitches once we work all the way around. Now, once you have worked all 42 stitches around, we're going to go ahead and move our stitch marker and join to that first slip stitch to complete our setup round. You can tighten that down if you want. Then we will turn our work and chain 1, and this is for round 1. And we're going to be working in the front loop only of these stitches in this round. We're not going to be working into that slip stitch or the chain 1. So go right into that very first stitch and single crochet 2. Be sure to mark the first stitch of the round so that we don't lose our space. And then we are going to single crochet into the front loop only of the next 6 stitches. And then we will work 2 single crochets into the front loop only of the next, and then single crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. And this is what's creating that line on the front. Like I said, you can work through both loops, but I love having that back loop hanging out there that creates a nice transition between these. And we'll continue to work 2 single crochets and then single crochet 6 all the way around until we have a total of 48 stitches for this round 1, which increases. Now, as we get to the end of this round, don't forget to work that very last stitch that is the same stitch we joined on the previous round. Sometimes it can kind of get swallowed up by that join, so it's always good to count. Now we're going to move our stitch marker, join to the first stitch of this round with a slip stitch, and then turn our work and chain 1. Now we're going to be working this in the back loop only. So this is starting more like our established stitch repeat, but we're going to work 2 single crochets into the back loop only of the very first stitch of this round. So round 2. And then we are going to single crochet into the next 7 stitches. And this is going to be the repeat around for round 2. So we will be doing 2 single crochets in the back loop only, and then back loop only single crocheting into each of the next 7 stitches. This is also an increased round, and this will bring us to a total of 54 stitches at the end of round 2. Now at the end of round 2, we will join to that very first stitch with a slip stitch, and then turn our work and chain 1. Now rounds 3 and 4 are going to be the same. To start round 3, we are going to skip a stitch and single crochet into the next. And I am working through both loops. Then we're going to go back to that skip stitch, yarn over, insert the skip stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and insert the same stitch, yarn over and pull up another loop. And now we have 5 loops on our hook. We will yarn over and pull through the first 4, and then yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 to complete that stitch. Now go ahead and mark the very first stitch of the round so that we know what stitch we're going to get back to join. Let's do that again. We're going to skip a stitch and single crochet into the next, yarn over and insert your hook into the skip stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. Do that again. Yarn over and pull through 4 loops, yarn over and pull through the remaining 2. Skip a stitch, single crochet, work back into that skip stitch with a modified puff, and that's the repeat we're going to work around for all the stitches in the round. This will not increase at all. Now I'm working the last group of those puff stitches in the round, and then we are going to go ahead at the end of round 3 and join to that very first stitch with a slip stitch, turn our work and chain 1. And then round 4 is an exact repeat. So we'll skip 1, single crochet in the next, working back into that skip stitch, work a puff stitch, and then be sure to place that stitch marker at the first stitch of the round to keep track of it. And then we'll just work what we did on round 3 again, but for round 4. And this is what creates those really gorgeous wheat stitches that look really pretty for this dog sweater. Now for round 5, after we have finished the previous round, joined and turned, we're going to chain 1. And for round 5, it's going to be really simple. We are just going to single crochet in the back loop only all the way around, no increasing. Our stitch count will be 54 stitches. Now after ending round 5, we're going to join, turn our work, and now we're going to be working in rows. We're going to chain 1. And then for row 6, so we're going to be switching back and forth between rounds and rows. But for row 6, we're going to single crochet in the back loop only for 10 stitches and then stop, leaving the remaining stitches of this row unworked. So we're switching to rows here for row 6. Now once you have 10 stitches, we're going to turn our work. So we're going to be working these 10 stitches. This is the space we're creating that goes between the legs. So down the front chest of the little pup, and we'll be creating space enough for their legs to be there comfortably. So now for row 7, we're going to chain 1, single crochet into the first stitch. I like to work single crochets on each side of the stitch repeat because I feel like it just makes it a little bit cleaner without working a puff stitch along the edge. And then we're going to skip 1, single crochet into the next, working back into that skip stitch, we will work a puff stitch. And we're going to work that puff stitch repeat until we get to the last stitch of this row, and we will simply single crochet into the last stitch. So here we are, the last stitch of row 7, and we will single crochet. And we have 10 stitches. So now we're going to turn our work and we're going to repeat that for row 8. And now for row 9, we're going to chain 1, single crochet in the back loop only for each stitch across. And then we're done working in rows after row 9. And for row 10, we're going to go back to be working in rounds. So we're going to get to the end of this row, turn our work, and now we're going to start round 10. And now for round 10, we've chained 1, and we're going to single crochet in the back loop only for the first 10 stitches of this round. So we're just working across those first 10 stitches. And then we're going to be making space for the leg. So once we've worked the first 10 stitches, we're going to chain 12. And then we're going to be skipping 12 stitches along the body. And then in the very next stitch, working in the back loop only, we will single crochet. So notice that we have chain 12, skip 12. This creates a nice space for the leg. And now we're going to single crochet in the back loop only until we get to the last 12 stitches of this round. But really quick, I want to address what will happen if you're not working a single crochet in the back loop only round when you're doing this space. So let's pretend for some of the other sizes, we were on a puff stitch row. You would have worked the puff stitches across all the first stitches in the panel, and then you would have chained as many chains as the pattern says. And then you're going to be skipping a different number of stitches because we'll need to skip one more stitch in order to work back into the previous stitch for that puff stitch. So pretending for a different size that we were working our puff stitches, we would have chained 12 but skipped 13 to do the next single crochet, because then we'll work back into the previous stitch with that puff stitch so that the space we're actually skipping is only 12 stitches. So I'm going to continue for this size working in that back loop only until the last 12 stitches of this round. And now that we are to the last 12 stitches of round 10, we are going to chain 12 and then skip the last 12 stitches and slip stitch to the first stitch of this round. And that's what round 10 looks like. We've created space for the front legs, and now we're going to turn our work. We're back to working 54 stitches all the way around, and this next round will be worked in those puff stitches. So I've chained one, I'm going to skip the first chain and then single crochet into the next chain, and then working back into that skipped chain stitch, we will work a puff stitch. So you're still doing the same repeats. We're just working them across the chain stitches as well. But I want to note, we're only going to be working so many of these. So we're going to work them across the chain space. But for this round, we will only be working the first 18 stitches or 9 puff stitch repeats. So we're only going to work the first 18 stitches in this stitch pattern. And then we're going to come back because I want to talk about making space for the leash. If you have a halter on your dog in order to like walk them, we want to be able to quickly clip on their leash if they're wearing the sweater over their halter. So we need to make a space for that. Now, when it comes to working this round, if you would like to have a space for the halter, so if you have a halter where you want to clip a leash to that halter, we need to make a space here that will be on the back. I've worked the first 20 stitches in this round. So that is 10 puff stitch repeats, 20 stitches in this round. Now I'm going to chain 6, but we will be skipping 7 because we have to have a space to work the stitch backwards. So we'll skip 7, single crochet in the next, and now we need to work that previous stitch as a puff stitch. And that means we've only skipped 6 in total. So chain 6, we've skipped 6, we're working in that puff stitch repeat, and that creates that space. If you don't want to create that space, continue to just work in that repeat all the way around without making those chains. But if you want to be able to quickly attach the leash to the harness if this sweater is worn over it, then you will want to make that space for the collar. And then I'm just simply going to be working all the way around to the end in that puff stitch repeat, including across those chain stitches. At the end of round 11, we're going to join, turn our work, and for round 12, we're simply going to be working in that puff stitch pattern all the way around. We're back to 54 stitches. We're not changing the stitch count for a little while here. We're going to be working the body, so we're going to work this round in those puff stitches. At the end of the round, we will join and then turn and chain 1. And for rounds 12 and 13, we are simply going to be single crocheting in the back loop only all the way around, 54 stitches for rounds 12 and 13. And now for rounds 14 and 15, we're going to be working that puff stitch repeat for those 2 rounds in the round without increasing or anything. We're just going to be doing those repeats all the way around for rounds 14 and 15. Now, as we're doing these repeats after the dog legs, I want to talk about making a custom adjustment for your pup because every pup can be different. So we are going to be working this to a point to then we're going to be working in rows again to create the fabric across the back. But every dog's torso can be a bit different. It may be different depending on whether your dog is female or male for how much you want to do rounds here before working in rows. So if you have a dog with, say, a really long torso, you might want some more of this body section. But if you don't, we don't want this to get so close to the dog that they can't go to the bathroom without getting this wet. We don't want this to be getting wet. So you want to make sure that you try it on your dog and maybe see how many rounds you may want to adjust before we go to working in rows, so that it is the best fit, because we might as well do some custom fitting if we're doing a handmade item to make it just perfect, better than anything you can buy from the store. Now I've worked this until I have a total of 20 rounds or rows. When we count these, we're counting from underneath because we want to make sure we count these rows here and then keep counting. If you count along the back, you're going to count and be short rows than you actually have, or rounds. And then also, I apologize, I believe I misspoke when I was talking about the rows of rounds. We did round 10 and round 11 and round 12 were the puff stitches. 13 and 14 were those single crochet rows, and 15 and 16 were those puff stitches. And then we did another 4 rows to get to round 20. And this is where we're going to start working in rows again instead of working in the rounds. Now for row 21, we're going to turn our work, chain 1, and we're going to start by single crocheting the first 2 stitches together. So we're going to do a single crochet, 2 together, and once again, it's a great idea to throw a stitch marker there. And then we are going to single crochet in the back loop only for 40 stitches. Now after single crocheting 40 stitches, we're going to single crochet 2 together and then turn. We're not going to be working the last 10 stitches of this row. We're going to turn our work, and then we're going to chain 1. And at the end of this last row, we had a total of 42 stitches for row 21. For row 22, we're going to single crochet 2 together. If you have another stitch marker, you can mark that stitch. And then we're going to single crochet in the back loop only until the last 2 stitches of this row. And now that we are to the last 2 stitches of this row, we are going to single crochet 2 together, reducing the stitch count to 40. So we're going to be reducing the stitch count by 2 stitches for quite a few rows until we get the length that we want. So I am going to turn my work, and now we're going to be working this in the puff stitch, where we'll single crochet 2 together at the beginning of the row, and then we're going to skip the next stitch and work a single crochet and then go back and work that puff stitch. We're going to work that all the way to the end of this row until we get to the last 2 stitches. Now at the end of row 23, we will single crochet 2 together. And then row 24 is a little bit different than 23. It's not an exact repeat, just to kind of keep things even. We're going to chain 1, single crochet 2 together, single crochet 1, and then go into that puff stitch repeat. And we're going to work that puff stitch repeat until we get to the last 3 stitches of row 24. And now as we get to the last 3 stitches, we are going to single crochet 1 and then single crochet 2 together to decrease by 2 for that row. Now we are going to be repeating those last 4 rows, decreasing 2 stitches by each row for 4 more rows. Now we are on row 28, and we have 28 stitches that we've decreased to, so we've created that nice area there. And now we are going to continue to work around the bottom opening just to finish it off with a really nice trim. Now, if you are on a different size, the instructions may have you turn. Either way, you want to make sure that the right side is facing out. So we have the right side facing out, and for this size, I am simply going to continue to work down this side. Now, since I've worked this last stitch, I can either use this stitch or for other sizes where we may have turned, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet on the corner here. And then we're going to work what is one of my favorite ways to work edging. It has a nice edge to where our single crochet stitches that we're doing will look nice and clean. We're going to insert our hook into the left bar of the last stitch that we just worked. And then we're going to go into the next space along the side of this dog sweater, yarn over and pull up a loop, pull that loop through the first loop on the hook, then yarn over and pull through 2 to complete that. And then that's going to be our repeat. We're going to go through that left bar of the stitch we just did, through the side or the next space, pull up a loop and pull it through the first loop, then yarn over and pull through 2. So once again, through that left bar, through the fabric, pull up a loop and pull it through the first loop on the hook, yarn over and pull through 2. Now when you get to the point of the sweater where there are stitches, so along back here and under here, you're just working each stitch, inserting where the stitch is along the edges. Just keep it nice and even. It's okay if it curls in a little bit because it will wrap around your dog. But before I keep going on this, I just want to note, great time once again before we start doing that edging to try it on your dog, because you may want to extend this out depending their torso. Maybe you want this to go like all the way down their back and it doesn't quite yet. You can continue to just work in the pattern repeat without decreasing to lengthen the length of this if you want to have it be a little bit longer. So I am going to continue to work this edging, and if you don't want to do this, you can just slip stitch around or single crochet around, but I love inserting to that left bar before going to the next stitch, pulling up and pulling through that loop, and then yarning over and pulling through 2. I find it creates a really nice clean edge. So I'm going to be working this all the way around. After working all the way around, you can slip stitch to join, or you can fasten off and grab your yarn needle. And we are going to do an invisible join where we're going to go into, I've skipped the next stitch, I'm going to the next stitch, pull through as if to crochet, and then go back down the top center of the last stitch you worked. And that creates a mock stitch on top. You can't even tell where you started or stopped. And then we can weave in all of our ends. So now we've got that final size in here. I love this colorful array of this yarn from Hirschner's. I hope you really enjoy making this for your cute little furry friend and family member. And be sure to hit that subscribe button and come back for some more fun projects soon.